So we're going to begin Pirkey Avos, Perek Aleph, Mishna Aleph. I'm going to be reading along. If you can't follow because it's too fast, so then slow it down or simply rewind. But I would suggest you do practice the reading. It's very important that you're able to read. We're going to be using on the bottom in the Rashi script a parish called the Rav. The Rav is Rabbi Ovadia Roberto. His name is Rosh Tevos, just like Rashi's name is Rosh Tevos for Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. Rosh Tevos means it's like an abbreviation. So Rabbi Ovadia Roberto wrote a parish on the Mishnah in the same style as Rashi. He has a Dibur HaMaskil, like a headline, and then he explains the Mishnah. Basically, he gives you the answer, and you have to figure out the question. Same style as Rashi. So we'll do the Mishnah, and then we'll do the Rav. Pretty much every Rav. The Mishnayos of Avos are halachos, and just like Mishnayos of Brachos and the Shabbos, you take a look at the Masechta of Brachos, it talks about the halachos of Brachos. You take a look at the Masechta of Shabbos, it talks about the halachos of Shabbos. We are also talking about halachos here, besides the Musar, but there will be halachos in here. And it's important to know that this is an all part of the Masorah. Our behavior is something that we can't just take or leave. It's not a matter of choice to behave nicely or not to behave nicely. It's Torah from Sinai, and that's one of the ideas we're going to get from the first Mishnah. Number one, our behavior is not just something we made up. It's a custom. It's traditional. It's nice. It's halacha. It's from Sinai. It's Hashem said, do it this way. And Moshe got it straight from Hashem and passed it down to us. This is how we Jews are supposed to behave. All right, so let's continue and we'll explain how the Masorah works. The first Mishnah talks about the importance of the Masorah and how to protect it. So the first thing it's going to describe is who is in charge of taking and teaching the Masorah and why they were the best people at the time. Remember, we were discussing this as similar to a relay race where you transfer the baton, that stick, from one runner to the next. So when you have a team of racers, you have to choose at each stage of the race who's the best runner. So they could all be fast, they could all be good, but you want the best person for that particular time. So when Moshe got the Torah from Har Sinai, he could have given it to a lot of people, but he gave it to Yoshua, we'll see, because Yoshua was the best person at the time. But why? So we're going to talk about that briefly. We have to finish the whole Mishnah. I don't want to make this video forever. So let's go on. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moshe got the Torah from Har Sinai, meaning he took the Torah shebiksav, the written Torah, and the Torah shebal peh, the spoken Torah, which explains the written Torah, but it's all Torah. U'Masorah liYoshua, and he took that, what he got, and he transferred it to Yoshua, like the baton in the relay race. He took it and then he gave it. Yoshua was Zakanim. Yeshua gave it to the Zakanim. They were called the elders. They were like the Shoftim and the next generation of the big leaders. I don't know if we're going to get a chance to get into. Let's move this video along. Let's go. Yeshua is the kingdom of the Nevi'im. The Zakanim transferred it to the Masorah to the Nevi'im, the prophets. Those are people like Shmuel Hanavi and Eliyahu Hanavi and Yirmiyahu. And then in the Nevi'im, Misorah La'anshe Knesset HaGadola gave it to the next generation, not the next generation, the next group of people. There are a bunch of generations within these people, within these groups. There's more than one generation of Zakanim and more than one generation of Nevi'im. And the Nevi'im then gave it to the Anshe Knesset HaGadola, the In English, it's often called the men of the Great Assembly, which doesn't really mean much. I call it the men of the great gathering of rabbis. Now, this last group of people the Mishnah lists are great people like the Zerubbabel, you may not have heard of, but Mordechai from the story of Megillah Esther you've heard of, and he was somebody of very high caliber, and the rest of the people that were there also were. They were called the Anshe Knesset Agadola because they were able to do something. They were so great, they were able to do something that's usually forbidden to be done. They were great enough to overrule previous rabbis. Normally, when you have a rabbi, a big rabbi, or a group of rabbis, decide that the halacha should be one way, nobody else could come along and undo it and say, no, we're going to change it back. It's only allowed to be done if the people are greater. And for somebody to say they were greater than the rabbis of the early generations, Nevi'im like Yirmiyahu or Daniel, and say they were greater and changed things that they did, that's a very big deal. So the previous generations of rabbis had decided to change the way that we daven, the words that we use in davening. They had said that we should not use certain words that describe how Hashem is so great. Because if we don't deserve to see this greatness and power of Hashem, they said we shouldn't use those words in our davening. But these people decided to change it back. The men of the great gathering of rabbis said that even though it's true that we can't see certain greatness and power of Hashem the way we did before, we could still see the greatness and power of Hashem if we looked at our lives in a different way. So they said we should go back to using the same words of davening as before. That was a very great thing to be able to do. And we're going to see next that what the Anshe Knesset Agadola said. That's going to be the next part of the Mishnah. First, let's read what the Rav uses as an introduction to Pirkey Avos here. Let's take a look at this Rav. Omer Ani, I say, Shemesechta Zu, this Mesechta of Mishnayos. Remember, again, it's a Mesechta of Mishnayos, just like the Mesechta of Shabbos or the Mesechta of Brachos or any other Mesechta, any other big group of Mishnayos gathered into a book. That's a Mesechta. He says, I say, in this Mesechta, Eina Miyusedes is not set up. The word Yesod means the main topic, the foundation. That is not Miyusedes al Perish mitzvah, to explain a mitzvah like other Mishnayos, mitzvahs of Torah, for any of the mitzvahs of the Torah. Kishar Mesechta Sheba Mishnah, like any other Mesechta in the Mishnah, like I said, like Brachos, etc. Ella, rather, Kulam Musorim Umidos. The whole Mesechta is Musar. Musar means to teach about behavior, to be straight behavior, to instruct and correct. And Midos. Midos are the traits or the character that people should have. And he said the wise men from the non-Jewish nations, Gam Kain Chibru Seforim, they also wrote books about how to behave properly, like I was telling you at the beginning of the video. Kamo, I can't even read this. Shabodim Alibam, rather. The way they made it up from their own hearts. They made it up. They just felt what was right. You know, sometimes from experience, and sometimes they might have been right. But Darchei Musar, in the ways of Musar, they might have had good ideas. Keitzad Yiznai Odam Im Chaver, how a person should act with his friend. But that's not the way we do things. It's like I really explained this at the beginning of the mission. That's why this Masechta begins. Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe got the Torah from Har Sinai, because it's not a matter of just making something up that sounds good and a nice way to behave. Benjamin Franklin, early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, and things like that. or Aesop's fables or any other good code of conduct that please give this seat to the elderly or infirm. You see it on a bus or something, anything like that, because those things could change. They're not Torah. You see, a lot of times people say, this culture is changing. We now have to look at behaviors in a different way because it's not Torah. Torah, unless it's Torah, it could change with the times. That's one problem with it. And the other problem is it could be wrong. Sometimes they'll say to do something that's good behavior that we would agree with, and sometimes not. So our way of behavior comes directly from Hashem. That's the first thing he says. We should know, therefore, that it's like halacha, or it is halacha in that sense. It's not halacha based on a specific mitzvah, but it's halacha of musar and midos. Then he says, second, why isn't this moving? There it goes. There, lomar lacha, to teach you, shahamidos v'hamusorim shebezu hamesechta, the midos and musar lessons in this mesechta, lo badu also chachmei haminos malibam. They were not just made up from their own hearts. It was, like I said, he said, it's the first words are to tell you, and the first Mishnah tells you, Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai, because these are from Sinai, not something they just made up. El af elu nemru b'Sinai. These teachings too were said at Har Sinai. So now let's go back to the Mishnah. The next line is from the Mishnah. When it's block letters like this, it's Mishnah. Haim, excuse me. Haim amru shlosha devarim. The Anshe Knesset Agadola said three things. They taught three laws regarding keeping the Masorah going. There are three things that we must know to keep the Masorah going. There's actually a lot. There's more things, but these are the three big things. Because we have to obviously know how to keep Shabbos, but in other halachas, we have to learn some Torah. But they're saying the three big things that keep the Masorah going. Let's read. In fact, let's take a look at this. That's exactly what the Rav says. Harbe devorim amru. They said a lot of things. When it says they said three things, they're not saying, all these people did, these Anshe Knesset Gedolah, these great gathering of rabbis, they just said three things and then they stopped talking. Harbe devorim amru. They said many things. Ella, but Shalosh devorim halalu amruhu. These three things that they said here are special. Why? Sheyesh bahem, that they have in them, kiyum haTorah, how to keep the Torah alive, how to keep the Torah going. So they're very important for what we're talking about the Masorah. What did they say? This is back to the Mishnah. Hevu misunin badin. Be careful with judgment. Be careful with if you're in a bezdin or if you're on a law, if you're a rabbi, you have to be careful how you make a legal decision. Slow down. Why? Let's take a look at what the Rav says. If you are a judge and somebody comes to you to be judged, pa'am, ushtayim, ushalosh, and you've already had precedents. You've already had the case once, twice, three times. So you might think it's a no-brainer. Al Tomar, don't say din zeh kavar bo lefanai. This case has already come before me. Vishanisi, vishalishti, bo, I've done it twice. I've done it three times. Elo, rather, havu musunim. Be careful. Kolomar means to say. Mamtinin kodem shetisbeku hadin. Be careful before you say the judgment. Now, the next part is Mishnah Beis. The rabbi who made these Hebrew sheets didn't include the rest of the Rab for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Maybe there was something in there he didn't want you to see. He thought it was too long or something. I will just tell you briefly what the rest of the Mishnah says. So let's explain this. He said three things. He only listed two here. No, here it is. Excuse me. Have a misunim b'din, v'ha'amidu talmidim harbe. So the first one is have a lot. Be careful with the judgment. We explained that. Have ha'amidu talmidim harbe. Have a lot of students. So the point here is you have to have a lot of students to keep the Masorah going, because that way they can teach it to the next generation. But that's not so simple as you might think. You say, oh, that's obvious. Of course, you have to have a lot of students if you're going to teach Torah to the next generation and keep the Masorah going. So why is that not so simple? Why wouldn't someone want to teach Torah to another person or have a lot of students? Because not everybody is necessarily a good student. It may not be good to teach Torah to somebody who's not going to act like what's called a ben Torah, a son of Torah, or bas Torah, somebody who's good person to go around saying that, hey, they know Torah. They have to behave the way somebody who learned Torah should behave. Knowing Torah is important, but behaving with derech eretz is more important. And if you disgrace the Torah by misbehaving, you say, oh, I'm a big rabbi, and then you go do something horrible. So it might be a very bad idea to make somebody who is a bad person into a Torah scholar. It's a responsibility to have Torah. You have to act a way that shows that Torah is a good thing to have. So some rabbis said to only teach Torah to people if you know that they're for sure going to behave the right way. That's not a simple thing to dispute. The Anshe Knesset Agadola said teach Torah to everyone unless one knows for sure that they will not behave properly. That's why they said Havu Talmidim Harbe, have a lot of Hamidu Talmidim Harbe, have a lot of students, and as long as there's a chance, it'll be good. Another person that you might not want to teach Torah to will be somebody who's going to abuse what they know, or to twist it to on purpose to make people sin. You know, there's a lot of problems of just teaching Torah to any old person. You got to make sure they're good people. You might you have to be very careful. But and even nowadays, even though you're supposed to have a lot of students, you still should be careful. So this is not a simple halacha. The third law was to make a fence around the Torah. This means that there should be smaller laws. A siyag is a fence. We should make a fence around the Torah. That means there should be smaller laws that keep us from breaking bigger laws. Sometimes when they want to crack down on crime, they say we have a broken windows policy. We'll enforce the small laws, and all the criminals will be scared because they're getting caught for every little thing. They're not going to go and break the big laws. They're not going to go stealing from people. If they get caught for doing even the smallest thing and get tickets, they're just going to watch their behavior. So a similar idea with mitzvos, we have to make protections for ourselves, keep every little thing, and sometimes make even more laws to make sure that we don't break bigger laws. So a better example, if you set an alarm early in the morning just to make sure you get up on time, in case you press snooze or whatever, or you wake up, you make sure you get up on time. So, or you put a fence around your garden and make sure nobody ruins your garden. It's a fence. An example would be like, say, muksa on Shabbos. Muksa means set aside, something set aside. So the rabbis made laws that some things should be set aside and not be moved on Shabbos so that you don't use them to break Shabbos. For example, you don't move a pencil, so you don't come to write on Shabbos. So that's a siyag l'Torah. So they said those things are necessary to help us make sure we pass the Masorah along to the next generation. It's kiyum Torah. If we have a fence around, we have to protect Torah. That's the idea. We have this fence around the Torah for the mitzvos. That means we love and protect the Torah. We keep it, and we don't do anything to disgrace it. Chas v'shalom. All right. So that took a while. Break them. If you have to go back and do it again, take a break and review. And we'll go on to the next Mishnah.